Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to day 3 of the Environment Virginia Symposium. We're glad to have you all back with us. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kim Connolly from VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics. I wanted to thank our hosts for this conference, our co-hosts, which is Virginia DEQ, Virginia DCR, Virginia Department of Forestry, and the Virginia Environmental Endowment. Want to remind everybody as well during the day today to visit our virtual exhibit hall. There's lots of great information there and great organizations to meet and learn about. I also want to thank today our conference staff here at VMI. They're the folks that are behind the scenes pushing all the buttons. We like to say we are a small but mighty team to be able to pull off this major conference. Emily Coleman is somebody that most of our presenters are very familiar with. Derek Pinkham, all of our attendees have been hearing from Derek, and then also Major Catherine Roy, who is really our tech guru and our expert. And we couldn't do this conference without all three of them. So I just want to give them a shout out today. Also, our thank you to our statewide program advisory committee. These are folks, they're listed in our digital program book. So I encourage you to look them up. It's a big group of people from state government, local government, nonprofits, business and industry who help us plan this conference every year and come up with the content. And I want to give them a big shout out for our first ever virtual Environment Virginia Symposium. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce this morning's plenary speaker. We're very pleased to have with us today Rear Admiral Ann Phillips. Ann is a special assistant to the governor for coastal adaptation and protection for the state of Virginia. Prior to joining the administration, she worked to address sea level rise and climate impact on national security at the regional, national, and international level, and chaired the infrastructure working group for the Old Dominion University convened Hampton Roads Sea Level Rise Preparedness and Resilience Intergovernmental Pilot Planning Project. That's a mouthful there. Preceding her work on climate impact and sea level rise, Ann served nearly 31 years on active duty with the United States Navy. She had the honor to commission and command USS Mustin, DDG 89, and to command Destroyer Squadron 28. Her final flag command was as Commander Expeditionary Strike Group 2, including all the amphibious expeditionary forces on the East Coast of the United States. Ann earned a Master of Business Administration with distinction from the College of William and Mary Mason School of Business in 2016. She's a 1983 graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In addition, she is a certified Chesapeake Bay landscape professional level 2. We asked Ann to speak with you today about the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Planning Framework. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of her talk. And with that, I give you Ann Phillips. Take it away, Ann.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today with all of you. This is my first exposure to Environment Virginia. I think the first year I was with the Northern Administration in 2018, I missed it. I had something else on my schedule. Last year, sadly, we had to cancel it, but this year we're back. And so thanks to VMI and thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Connolly for inviting me to speak, and certainly for all the support staff that are a part of making Environment Virginia go and work, and particularly under these challenging times. So it's an honor to be here. I'm here to talk to you all today about the work that I'm doing as Special Assistant to Governor Northam for Coastal Adaptation and Protection, a position created by the 2018 General Assembly. Many of you may be quite familiar with this. Some of you may not have heard of it at all, depending on where you are within the Commonwealth. My position is to focus exclusively on coastal adaptation and protection. But as you'll see through my comments over the next few minutes, an awful lot, to say more colloquially, of what matters for coastal adaptation and protection matters statewide. And so I almost have a foot in both worlds. Although the framework process I will talk to you about today is really focused on coastal adaptation and protection. But because of it, we've been able to do some things statewide as well. So we'll talk about those. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that as we move forward with this planning process, this is a public planning process, and one of our key focus areas is how to best develop a consistent outreach exchange with communities, with localities, particularly in coastal Virginia in this context, so that we can over time experience a continued dialogue to understand what their needs are and how we can best support their needs. The framework document in particular that you're looking at here, this is the cover, was released October 22nd of 2020 by Governor Northam. And it's the product of quite a bit of support and background from legislation created by the 2020 General Assembly that helped us get to this point where we felt that we needed to move forward and could actually create a full coastal master plan, which was directed by Executive Order 24, signed almost more than 2 years ago now. So I'd like to go over some of this quickly because some of this, I know many of you might be well aware of some of this legislation, some of you may not, but all of these things collectively are moving us towards not only coastal adaptation and protection, but flood adaptation and protection. First and foremost, starting with House Bill 1313, all of this is from the 2020 General Assembly, except House Bill 1836, which is mentioned there in the top line. But the Chief Resilience Officer position was actually created. That's not me. I'm a Special Assistant for Coastal Adaptation and Protection. But before then, that position had drifted around between secretariats, and it now resides within the Secretary of Natural Resources, and in fact is directly aligned with the Secretary of Natural Resources now through House Bill 1836. My position, as I said, created in 2018. As a special assistant to the governor, I am aligned with natural resources, but in particular, House Bill 1313 added additional code direction for not only the Chief Resilience Officer, first time it appeared in code, but also added additional connections for me to really flood protection programs in the Department of Conservation and Recreation that involve statewide flood coordination planning, not just coastal flood adaptation and protection. House Bill 981, we'll talk about a little bit more later, but that is legislation that created and allowed Virginia to join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which we did this year in January 2020. And that is what is providing funding for, among other things, the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, which is a statewide fund to focus on community preparedness to adapt and protect communities and localities from flooding challenges, rainfall flooding, storm surge, coastal flooding, all of the above. But this is a statewide fund also created through House Bill 981. 1164 addresses DEQ in particular to address climate change across all of its programs and permitting processes, and also to ensure environmental justice is considered in the context of that work. And of course, we're working towards that as a more statewide across all agencies effort. House Bill 504 added to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, amended it to include coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise. Work is going on in that context now through the Department of Environmental Quality. And in fact, the regulations are out for public comment, which closes May 3rd. Senate Bill 776, Senator Lewis's bill focuses on living shorelines as the approved shoreline management approach unless science shows they are not suitable. And that is a strengthening of that regulation. That is also out for public comment under VMRC. That closes March 31st. So if you want to make public comments to those two items, please do so in the near future. Lastly, in 2020, the Joint Commission on Technology and Science directed a coastal study looking at economic consequences of weather-related events. The Virginia Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine has agreed to co-chair that study. That study is underway. Initially, it was to complete in a year, but because of COVID, they have an extension, and it will actually wrap up by the end of this, in time to have a report for the next session. So legislation to be aware of if you are not already. Back to the framework. We're focusing on these 5 guiding principles. First and foremost, that climate is changing, and we need to consider what those changes mean in the context of how we will make decisions for our future. We should make decisions on planning, on engineering, on development, on regulatory processes, with considering, knowing that we must keep in mind that some of those processes will be impacted by changes we will see related to climate. It's not just water and rainfall that we're seeing more of. We also have rising temperatures, so there are heat challenges that we didn't have before, vectors, algal blooms, changes in the environment and the kind of species and creatures that we're seeing living throughout the Commonwealth that perhaps didn't exist here before, that we will have to learn to deal with, and seeing things that we like and want to keep migrate north as it gets cooler. So all kinds of things are considered in that context. Enhancing, and I would say ensuring equity. Many circumstances that involve climate impact fall hardest on those with the least opportunity and the least number of choices to deal with, address, and adapt to the kinds of circumstances that we're going to see in our future. So how do we ensure that people are not left behind just because they happen to live in an unfortunate location or because they have been ignored over time? So equity is a tremendous piece of this. You will talk more about that in a few minutes. Ensuring that natural and nature-based solutions are considered in the context of what we're doing, particularly as the first line of defense. A living shoreline is not going to stop sea level rise, but it can definitely slow down the onslaught of continued rising waters and storm surge over time. And in that context, considering, okay, if we want to enhance our shoreline and improve those kinds of co-benefits, ecosystem services that not only help slow down the onslaught of water, but also improve water quality, where do those shorelines have an opportunity to migrate to in the future? Which gets to the emphasis on Senate Bill 776, focusing on living shorelines as an opportunity there. We know all solutions will not be green, some will be gray, but where those gray solutions are required, how can we make them as green as possible and ensure we still have habitat, ecosystem services, etc. We also understand that what is suitable for a highly intense urban, suburban environment in a region is not a solution for a more rural environment. And so how to tailor solutions and priorities based on regional needs and community needs rather than just one size fits all. We know that won't work in coastal Virginia, 10,000 miles of tidally influenced shoreline, but all of it very different in many cases. And as an added challenge there, much of it is privately owned, just to make a more complicated situation to consider. Finally, how do we pay for this? I am often find myself saying that people think their locality should bail them out. The localities think the state should bail them out. The state thinks the federal government should bail them out. And none of those things are actually going to happen. So there will be a series of opportunities to work with federal funding solutions and opportunities, work with state and develop state funding solutions and opportunities, work with locality and local and regional funding solutions and opportunities. But it's going to take all of us working collectively to prioritize what we want to do and build strategies for how to pay for the things that we know we need the soonest. And so to that end, the need to have a coastal master plan. The primary goals of this planning process, first and foremost, are to do an assessment to understand what's critical and vulnerable along Virginia's coast, identify and prioritize projects that are already in place. This does not mean telling localities they cannot do something. It just means understanding where we have the most critical need the soonest and what kinds of solutions could be adapted there and what kinds of solutions may already be in place or underway there. If they're already in place or underway, do we need to do something to help facilitate moving them along faster? If there's no solution at all, we need to develop a solution and then create a situation where we find a way to finance it and get that solution moving. We may find that we have tiered sets of solutions. Green infrastructure first, followed by something else in the future. We'll see. But if we don't have a full state assessment of what's critical and vulnerable, what projects there are that are addressing those needs already, what should we be prioritizing? In other words, are there places where we have need, but big gaps, nothing in place? That's what the state brings to bear, so that we can focus and target on areas that have need and don't have solutions. It doesn't mean if you have a solution, you can't keep moving along if you're a locality. I talked about financing as a part of that process, and of course, incorporating future climate change projections across state programs and coordinating across federal, state, and local efforts. We've divided coastal Virginia, which is the 8 coastal planning districts, roughly everything east of I-95, into 4 master planning regions. We thought this would be a way to work with a larger regional approach for planning districts and regional commissions that have shared kinds of needs already. They're either dealing with similar circumstances or they already plan together. They share hazard mitigation planning processes, or they share other collective needs and interests. So we may find over time that we need to change this, but it's a start. And so this is what we're going from as an entering argument. Immediate actions that are a result of the framework being released in October. First and foremost, it directed the creation of a technical advisory committee, which was codified by Executive Order 71. There are 26 named members in that executive order, but we may invite others, and we have. There are 7 subcommittees that have been created that go with the technical advisory committee. I should note that all of the meetings are public. The 7 subcommittees are up and running. They're focusing on project identification, evaluation, finance, community outreach, science, research and best practices, economic development, and building and enhancing federal partnerships. Meetings may be found several different places. They're all on the Town Hall, Commonwealth Town Hall page. They are also under the Secretary of Natural Resources resilience page. You also have, we have a TAC page, Technical Advisory Committee page, and you can find all the future meetings and access to past meetings, videos, agendas, any materials used on those 2 pages. So you can find it directly on that Natural Resources page, or you can go to the TAC page. So please join us, please sit in, please sign up for meetings and participate. There's a lot of work to be done here, and input is valuable. We also have elevated the Coastal Zone Management Program. It resides within the Department of Environmental Quality, but as the only entity that was collaborating across stakeholders and including planning districts and regional commissions in the process, I should add that they are all members of the Technical Advisory Committee as well. The Coastal Zone Management Program's long, effective work was maybe not being used to the greatest advantage in the Commonwealth. So by elevating them to a circumstance where they are reporting directly to the Secretary of Natural Resources for coastal adaptation and protection, so that we are able to take advantage of the work that they're doing, understand it and build on it, and consider it in the course of our planning process, because they've done so much already. We, under Executive Directive 13, they now will report directly to Secretary Strickler, and in fact do report directly to Secretary Strickler. So still very strong connection to NOAA. They still have their coastal policy team. They still have their coastal planning district meetings. All those things exist as they have before, except that we just see a little bit more exposure to the good work that they're doing and the capacity that they are helping to build across coastal Virginia. Lastly, I talked about community engagement as a key element to moving forward here. I should mention, and I will on the next slide, that we have hired a contractor to provide us professional engineering services. I'll talk more about that in the next slide, but a key factor of the work and support that they will give to us is helping our community outreach subcommittee and other interested stakeholders develop this continued outreach communication and the ability to include public input in a public planning process that will withstand the test of administrations. So I've talked about what we've done. We talked about the Technical Advisory Committee. We've talked about outreach and building that process. We also released an RFP in December. It closed December 31st, and we've since then worked through a selection process to hire a private professional engineering services firm to assist us. Last week on Thursday, we announced that Dewberry was the winner of that award, and they and their team will now move forward in helping us do a number of things related to coastal master planning. Their team also includes the Water Institute of the Gulf and certified small and minority-owned women and minority-owned businesses, GKY and Associates, Vision Planning and Consulting, and the Miles Agency. So quite a bit of work to be done there. As you can imagine, we're moving fast now that we have them on board to make progress and take advantage of the work they will do for the Commonwealth and the advice that TAC will give the Commonwealth so that we can develop our first master plan with a sustained master planning process. I mentioned Reggie earlier, joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That Virginia officially joined January 1st of this year. The first auction, and there are quarterly auctions for carbon credit sales, took place March 3rd and netted the Commonwealth of Virginia overall $43 million, just over $43 million in income. That money is split. 50% goes to the Department of Housing and Community Development for energy efficiency outcomes in the context of improving energy efficiency, particularly for low and middle income housing areas and communities. 45% of that money goes to the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund to work to prepare communities and make them more resilient to flooding statewide. That is 19.6 million for people who haven't yet pulled out their calculators. That money is now in place under the Virginia Resources Authority, who will hold the money and manage it for the Department of Conservation and Recreation, who is overseeing developing the principles and guidelines and the grant manual for this fund. The other, if you're missing 5%, 3% goes to DEQ to manage the participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. There are 11 states in this initiative now. And as a member, Virginia has a number of financial requirements and other monitoring and oversight requirements that require some funding to support. And 2% goes to DHCD to be able to manage their portion of the fund. DCR may use monies from the fund to help manage the fund as required to assist the Virginia Resources Authority in the work that they will do to help manage this process over time. This fund is intended to be both a grant fund and a loan fund. Over time, a revolving loan fund. We're focusing on grant processes initially as an entering argument, and there is a 25% set aside for low income communities, which is defined in the legislation as 80% of the median income of a locality or a community within a locality, or a designated opportunity zone as designated by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. So there is a specific focus to get more access and more equity into communities with the greatest need in this fund, and that's for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund portion. So the other thing I should point out here, there are 4 quarterly auctions. We've just had our first one. We ended up with a higher result than we thought, more money into the fund than we thought, all the funds, but we'll see over time. The prices value fluctuate, and so we'll see as we go through for the year what kinds of income we have over time. And this, of course, is all good news, but I want to issue a word of caution here. It's a whole lot more money than we've had up until now to put into flood protection directly. We had none. Now we have this money, but it will not be enough. So if you're a locality or a community right now and you're thinking to yourself, I'll give you an example. A very well qualified community member in a Hampton Roads locality talked with me about this effort late last fall, and said, wow, it sounds like a fascinating process. There's some great projects in my neighborhood. And they actually sent me one that their locality is already approved and that they're working on. And yes, it's an excellent project. It would be a good thing to do that would be right in line with what we think we would want to do with these kinds of funds. $70 million. So that gives you some context for how things, the kinds of needs that we have versus the kind of funds that we have. But what we can do with this fund is build capacity. We can build capacity. We can help communities understand where their needs are. We can help them get access to federal dollars, other state dollars, to align grant programs to give more opportunities here. We can help do some projects or get some projects moving. We can help provide some match. We can help build resilience. So there's a lot of opportunity in this. It's a tremendous change and opportunity for the Commonwealth. We're very excited to be getting started with it. I talked a little bit about coastal assessment already, project ID, project prioritization. We're also developing a strategic relocation handbook that is not intended to be directive in any way, shape, or form. I get a lot of questions about this, some concerns, some interest. It's a very broad spectrum, but in the context of whether you're moving 6 houses across the street as a community, or whether you want to relocate your home somewhere else, that's possible. We think we should begin as a Commonwealth to consider how Virginia, under Virginia code, Virginia law, Virginia statute, will think about and things that people and communities would need to do to prepare for such circumstances, even if they're way, way in the future. Lastly, the date to target our first coastal master plan release is this fall, November. And I want to emphasize that this is intended to be a process that will continue. It will not stop here. The entire value of this effort will be that we will understand our risk, but much better understand our risk, much better understand the costs involved in dealing with that risk, and the need to continue a coordinated statewide public planning process, not only with coastal adaptation, but with flooding writ large. Again, it's intended to be cyclical. So we've targeted every 5 years. Maybe it'll be less, maybe it'll be more. That's similar to what Louisiana and Texas have already done. They also have similar processes that, as many of you are aware, have been well underway. But the point is being able to take community input and fit it back into the planning process to help prioritize what needs are and what outcomes should be over time. Lastly, a couple last slides here. One, for those who are in coastal Virginia, I'd like to make you aware of this work that was done by the Commonwealth Center for Recurrent Flooding Resilience last year in support of our master planning process. CCRFR was able to take updated nuisance flooding data from NOAA, which we had not been able to really model accurately before. We just had one number. Now we have, it's nuanced based on region and locality and impact in unique to specific areas. And using public data show how not only nuisance flooding, but a moderate event, storm, Cat 1 storm, with sea level rise included using the curve the state has selected for planning, which is NOAA's intermediate high scenario from their 2017 research, how that would impact localities over time for the years 2040, 2060, and 2080. So this has been done for the entire coast of the Commonwealth. There's a need to do such work inland. Of course, VFRIS does give you some capacity there, but including projected rainfall intensity, duration, and frequency would also be helpful. We'll talk about that more in a minute. This is Norfolk. I live, my house is somewhere on this picture, so I pick where I live. But what you can see here is the impact of sea level rise plus nuisance flooding, and then maybe a moderate Cat 1 storm on top of that. So this is publicly available. You can go into ODU's CCRFR website and find a report that goes with this that was authored by George McLeod and Professor Tom Allen. And you can find access to the link that will show you this work. It's interactive, so you can get in there and look at it and see what impacts might occur in your community in the future. And the reason this matters is nuisance flooding is a persistent challenge for those of us who are on the coast. It can happen anytime, wind-driven, rain-driven, in concert with tide and other things. So it's these kinds of smaller events that are beginning to become significant challenges for us and are driving outcomes and impacts and making the need much more urgent. I talked about things that are coastal also being statewide. These are some of those things. And so this is a list that I've been working off of since I got to this job, and we're making a little progress. So first of all, a lot of complaints if you're in the engineering field, perhaps in other planning fields, the challenges of the Atlas 14 program and the fact that we realized that the data for the Commonwealth, which was last updated in 2006, does not appear to be reflecting what we actually see. And the company Dewberry, by chance, has done some work at Virginia Beach that reflected that. VTRC, working with the University of Virginia, has also done some work in the Crater Planning District area that shows similar outcomes. We're seeing more rainfall than is projected by this federal standard for rainfall volume. We have worked with the National Weather Service and the Federal Highway Administration through a somewhat intricate process to apply to update our Atlas 14 data, and then have joined a consortium of 4 states, North Carolina, Maryland, and Delaware, to actually update our portion of the data that was last done in 2006. So it will be called Atlas 14 Volume 13. It is fully funded. The work will start probably later this year. It was supposed to start this summer. There's contract update between FHWA and the NOAA National Weather Service, but we're funded, we're approved, and you can thank VDOT and DEQ for the money to get this done for the Commonwealth of Virginia. It will take 2 years. This is not a quick process, but that will update our historic rainfall numbers. And the reason we need to update our historic rainfall numbers is so that we know whether our future projections are accurate or not. We have also, thanks to the Chesapeake Bay program and the Chesapeake Bay Trust and the Chesapeake Bay Urban Stormwater Work Group, which is headed up by Norm Goulet from the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, been able to join a program that was already being done for the Bay watershed to model predictive rainfall intensity, duration, and frequency projections for the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Thanks to, again, VTRC, ODU, and BIMS, CCR at ODU and BIMS, we found the additional money to do the entire state. So the bottom third that was going to be left out will be included in this projection and this research. It will be ready by May of this year. It is well underway. And that will show for the entire Commonwealth future projected rainfall intensity, duration, and frequency. It's work's done by Cornell and Carnegie Mellon. For those, if you want to get into the geek level here, very similar to work that Dewberry did, similar process. So it'll be interesting to see how it lines up with what they did for the larger Hampton Road, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area. But this is coming. And so as localities, as planners, as regional commissions, you will be able to see this and look at these projections, and all of the data will be public. You'll be able to use it in different ways if you need it, but you'll also be able to go online to the Northeast Climate Center website and pull it down and look at it for your locality to give you an idea of what you might see for rainfall in the future. So good work. Predictive floodplain mapping, still a need. Updating probable maximum precipitation data, still a need. Really, to do that accurately, we should have Atlas 14 updated, because that's what comes into that in large part. As an entering argument, we really need as a Commonwealth a full riverine and coastal gauge system. VDEM owns the iFlow system. There's a system going in under USGS in the Rappahannock River. There's coastal tide watch in the Hampton Roads region, but we do not have a full system like North Carolina does. We should. So that's a goal. And of course, we need not only a coastal resilience, but maybe a broader climate resilience strategy in time, all in due time. And we talked a lot about the need for consistent and dedicated funding and how best to achieve that with the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund as a start at the statewide level. Lastly, in the context of this work, we have set up an email address, resilient-coast-virginia@governor.virginia.gov. Please reach out to us there. And you can also contact me. My contact information was shown at the beginning. That's not a challenge. And I get lots of emails, and you can also email here at Resilient Coast VA, and we will respond to you. So thank you very much for your time and your attention this morning, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Ann. Ann, you covered a lot of territory in a short period of time, and I really appreciate how timely it is to have you here participating in the conference, because you're obviously right in the middle of everything. Some things have, reports have just been done, and there's other ones that will be coming out shortly. So we really appreciate the timing, and hopefully we'll get you back here next year for an update. We do have one question in the chat, and I encourage everybody that's listening that might have a question or a comment to use the chat, and we'll keep going. So here's one from Dave Gunnarsson. Does your planning process work with the insurance industry to understand their data, assumptions, and projection? They make their projections to help them set premium rates for coastal flooding and damage, and could be a good source of information since they have a large financial exposure and work hard to protect their companies from loss.
A great, an excellent question, and getting to Mr. Gunnarsson, thank you very much. Getting into the insurance industry is a challenge. However, with the help of the Virginia Coastal Policy Center and Professor Elizabeth Andrews, who leads that center, over the course of the past few months, she and I have been on a crusade to find our way to the insurance industry. We worked with the State Corporation Commission. They sent us to a nationwide, well-known insurance risk assessment and advisory group, which Milliman and Associates, they're out of San Francisco. We've talked with them, we've worked with them, we've also through them been able to meet some of the large actually commercial private flood insurers nationwide. There is a flood insurance, a commercial flood insurance industry in the country. There is not much commercial flood insurance in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There may be an opportunity in the future for that market to expand. Of course, most of it now is all done under the National Flood Insurance Program, and certainly within the Commonwealth, we're in that process. So it's tough to get in there, and I will say that an awful lot of the kinds of work that insurance companies and reinsurance companies are doing in this regard, they do not want to share. It's proprietary, and they don't want to tell you about it. So that's a little bit of a challenge. However, we also have a relationship with TransRe. They've been very supportive of some of the work the Virginia Coastal Policy Center has done. The CEO happens to be a William & Mary graduate. So that's been helpful, Mike Zatnar, and he's also made some connections for us and is also always willing to talk about it. But getting direct information from insurance companies, I will also say that we have worked with not only the American Flood Coalition, but kind of their spin-off nonprofit, First Street Foundation, which has done a tremendous amount of climate risk and flood risk research and continues to build on that research and is continuing to expand their work. And they are doing risk modeling, not only for the insurance industry, but they will do it at no cost with localities if they're willing to share data and help them refine their process. So we have our kind of, I guess I would say, we're starting to get our tentacles into some different areas there to try to understand more about what's going on, but it's a challenge. It's a very restrictive, I guess I would say, industry in that regard. But thank you for the question. And I see it. And if you've got contacts that you think would be beneficial, that would be tremendously helpful, and I would welcome them. So happy to talk about that offline. Lieutenant Colonel Connolly, do you want me to run down the questions? I see another one from Adrian Kashula.
Yeah, go ahead. If you're on the chat, go ahead.
So strategic relocation guidance, that work is being done through the Science Research and Best Practices Subcommittee. We did that deliberately to keep it an academic focus and to ensure that we had appropriate background there. We do have some advisors and actually subcommittee members who do have quite a bit of experience in the Georgetown Climate Center's work and in other kinds of work that has been done in the country. I would say that the most detailed manual on this context is something called LA Safe that was done by the Louisiana Department of Housing and Community Development. So our intent here is what are best practices that have been done elsewhere, which of them apply to the Commonwealth, viewing that through the lens of known law, policy, standard in the Commonwealth, and then beginning to come up with a series of recommendations for considerations that localities, communities, individual citizens, and property owners could consider in the context of, how do I make decisions and what kind of decisions should I make? Again, whether I'm moving 6 houses across the street or whether I'm considering, moving a home or actually, relocating a village. We just don't know what people will want to do or want to consider in the future. Trying to scroll down to. With rainfall data, is intensity of storm events considered in the research? Yes, that's the whole objective of the work that the Chesapeake Bay Commission is doing, to understand, based on U.S. Global Change Research Program data, what intensity, duration, and frequency we are seeing and will expect based on projections to see in the future. So it is based on volume and intensity over time, meaning that we're seeing more intense storms with more rain in a shorter period of time in some cases, or in the same period of time. How the state, let's see. Hello, speaker. With localities and PDCs to implement state efforts. So a big part of there's kind of a three-pronged approach here. One is we worked with the offerer, with the awardee, Dewberry, and we wrote into the RFP. So if you look at the RFP, which is public, you can see the kinds of things we asked for in the context of assisting with outreach. The challenge in the time of COVID, and we're maybe seeing some change, I think, as we see more and more vaccines roll out and more opportunities for that for everyone. A better chance to do in-person outreach with localities. But our first step is a full coastal assessment. And then based on that, what communities do we need to target? What communities are most at risk? And then working our way into those communities with the right message and the right messenger. So in that context, we can have all the facilitation we want with the best facilitators out there to help us set up such circumstances. But if we don't have the right communities targeted and we don't have the right messages and messengers helping to get into that community ahead of anything we might do to get them thinking about this, to understand what their needs are and kind of prepare them, then we're not going to make a lot of progress. So there's the approach that the state is working. There is a community outreach subcommittee who is advising the technical advisory committee and the Commonwealth on how they think we should be working into this process over time, where we should be targeting, what our messages should be targeted to the specific communities. And there is a newly forming still very much in progress, coalition of nonprofit stakeholders and interest groups who can be the messenger with the right message for localities and communities where they are already working on similar or related issues. So that's new. It's just getting started, but we are working into a kind of a triumvirate of approach with assistance from the contractor, the state community outreach technical advisory subcommittee of the technical advisory committee, and then this, collaborating with our nonprofit partners to help build this process over time. There is an example. It is Louisiana. Foundation for Louisiana, working directly with Louisiana Department of Housing and Community Development, that has developed a long-standing process where they have standing outreach processes where they get solicit input from communities. They have people within those communities educated to actually facilitate and coordinate within their communities, get their message back to the Commonwealth, back to the state, and then provide feedback from the state back into the communities about the progress they're making and the things they need and additional information they might need from them. So it has taken Louisiana years to build this up. So this isn't going to be a short-term process, just to manage expectations there. But we feel that we must get started, and stepping back to the larger coastal adaptation and protection effort, the whole effort that we are going through this year is to show why we need such a thing and why it must continue.
Well, Ann, thank you so much. I see we have other questions coming in, but we're almost out of time. So obviously we're going to have you back next year. And can you remind if anybody has a direct question for you, remind us again what your email contact is?
Sure. 2 ways to get to me, and I see a couple names that I know asking me questions, and they already know how to get to me. But my email contact is my name, Ann.Phillips @governor.virginia.gov. And if you search on the Secretary of Natural Resources webpage, you'll find my email. And also Resilient Coasts VA @governor.virginia.gov, and I could actually put it, somebody's going to suggest that I put it in the chat, and so I will do that, provided I can type correctly. That's me, and I don't type very well, but anyway, it wasn't too bad.
You just need to hit enter.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So thank you, Ann, so much. Again, this was so timely. I will, one of the last questions dealt with community outreach, and I will remind folks we had a great session in yesterday afternoon in session 7, community change, community-driven climate resilience. Great presentation. That recording will be put up on the conference portal as soon as we've got all of our sessions turned around. So I highly recommend, if you were not in that session, folks, to go back and check that out. Okay. I'm getting a thumbs up that we think it's already up. I'm not sure if it's on the portal yet or not, but we're trying to turn around the recordings as quickly as we can. So thank you, Ann, again. That was a great presentation. To our attendees, we have a 15-minute break, and then we'll be coming back at 10:45 for session 8, which will have 3 separate offerings for you to choose from: environmental justice, a forestry conservation success story of collaboration, and a climate change session on community resilience. Also, everyone, be sure to visit our virtual exhibit hall, which is open throughout the day. Thank you again, Ann, and we'll be back here at 10:45 for session 8. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.